Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We start this yet another webinar of ICTCT. My name is Alexey Laureshin. I'm a member of the ICTCT steering committee, and I will be the host of today's webinar. And before we start, just a few words about upcoming ICTCT activities. The closest in the pipeline, we have an extra ICTCT conference, which is organized together with the Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals. It will take place in Quebec City in Canada, just in a couple of weeks. And then also the regular ICTCT conference traditionally takes place in October. This year it will be in Berlin, Germany, organized together with the German Aerospace Center. So the submission for the conference is already closed, but registration is still open. And another traditional activity in connection to the conference, we will organize again traffic safety researchers course for 2 days. High-level experts come in and share their knowledge and experiences. So registration for the course is I'm not sure if it is announced or opened, but like it is still possible. It is still possible, and it will be open until just a few weeks before the actual course start. And then also reminder of some other side activities, the ICTCT subcommittees. The Nordic Traffic Safety Academy is having its research school in Norway starting from next week. And also the AfroSafe subcommittee organizes the second conference, which will take place in Winneba in Ghana in August. So again, submission for the conference is already closed, but registration is still open. Yeah, and again, a traditional reminder, if you want to be updated on ICTCT activities, please sign up for our emails or newsletters, follow us up on the social media, because there is quite much activities going on. Yeah, and now back to today's speech. Today we were supposed to have 2 speakers, actually. Maria Krafft, the current traffic safety director of the Swedish Transport Administration, and Claes Tingvall, who was the traffic safety director before Maria. Unfortunately, Maria got some hindrance, so she will not be able to join, but Claes is here and he is well equipped to give an excellent speech. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that many of you know Claes well. He has been a speaker at ICTCT webinars before, and also he is quite famous profile in the circles of traffic safety professionals. But to remind you, he was the traffic safety director for about 20 years until his retirement in 2015, but he is still very active. He is an adjunct professor at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden and also at Monash University in Australia. And Claes really played a key role in developing, implementing the Swedish Vision Zero, or what is what is referred to as safe system globally, but in Sweden we call it Vision Zero. So he really contributed a lot to developing the theory and also make sure that it got implemented. And the improvements that Sweden showed during the last 30, 40 years is quite impressive. So it's a good proof that Vision Zero, if put in action, it really works. So I think I will stop here, and Claes, now the floor is yours. Please take over.
Thank you, Alexei, and thank you for those nice words. I can promise you, you will have equally long CVs if you're as old as I am, or when you are become as old as I am now. Thank you also for inviting me. Maria sends her regards, of course, but she got tied up with something else. I don't know what it was, but obviously she couldn't attend here. But we've made the presentation together and decided what should be included. So I'm going to show you some slides, and I will now share my screen so that we have the possibility to have a look at some of the documentation from what I will be talking about. And I will be talking about the sort of the global level, what is going on, what seems to be the directions on that level where WHO and some other sort of global players are operating. As you know, WHO has a very important role in the UN system, having the responsibility for health questions, and road safety is considered to be a public health problem, illustrated, of course, by the numbers of killed and seriously injured, that road safety or road crashes are the cause of death and the leading cause for some groups, like young people. But that it is very much related to the low and middle income countries, where more than 90% of the deaths occur, which means that actions or recommendations given by the WHO, of course, directs very much towards those parts of the world where there is a very high risk of death, and where the majority of deaths and serious injuries take place. And what has happened over the sort of past years, if we have let's say a 10-year or something like that perspective, is that in 2015, road safety was for the first time a part of the Millennium Goals and what became the 2030 Agenda, or the Sustainable Development Goals. And that was an important step. I'm not sure all of us, including myself, really understood the impact of becoming a part of the sustainability agenda. It's a gradual process where more and more we understand the kind of tools and what kind of allies we are having. But no doubt, the 2020 conference on road safety, the one preceding the Marrakech conference that I will be talking about, the sort of marriage or inclusion of road safety into the sustainability agenda really got some boost, and a number of things were developed, like the academic group or expert group that was formed for that conference by the Swedish government, picked up 9 recommendations for where road safety fits into a bigger agenda. Things like related to reporting or sustainability reporting, to procurement, and a number of other things as well, where road safety can contribute to other major goals in the community, in things related to health, equity, and climate, but also where road safety can improve through actions taken by other sectors or disciplines related to sustainability. And some of these recommendations, I'm not saying that it was because of the recommendations, but some things are really going on, I'm sure. And this is not a brand new slide, actually. There are more cities around that has now 30 km/h as maximum speed limit, not because of safety only, but because of a lot of other reasons, for active mobility and for livability more generally, but also for noise and things like that. And as we all know, low speed in cities has nothing to do with congestions and things like that. And I think it's been a good lesson for many big cities to improve both safety, accessibility, and a lot of other factors by introduce this kind of low speed limits. Unfortunately, not in Sweden yet, but hopefully it will happen. There were other things related to, for example, the commercial sector, and very much about truck safety, simply because trucks are involved in so many crashes with pedestrians and others in low and middle income countries, and where your NCAP, the consumer test program, started also to include trucks, different kinds of commercial vehicles, but very recently also trucks. This is going to be very important. One area where I was involved quite a lot personally is in sustainability reporting. I'm sure you know about carbon footprint, and that most corporations or big organizations, they need to report on their carbon footprint, on their targets for the carbon footprint, and also the kind of actions based on science that they undertake. This is a part of the sort of it's a part of financial sector where those who are involved in funding or involved in insurance, in loan givers and so on, needs to have information to know about the future of a corporation. Like if there's a corporation who says we don't care for the climate, it's probably not a safe investment as a corporation that is really understand the challenges of what we need to do with our carbon footprint across the world. Now safety is included, and one of the recommendations was that include road safety, the safety footprint of corporations. What happens in their supply or value chains, how many that are killed and seriously injured as a result of their operations through their own employees, but also through contracted service partners or other types of partners and suppliers. With the sort of same idea as for the carbon footprint, meaning that you should declare your safety footprint, your targets, and what you are aiming to do. So there has been a development of what's something called FIA Road Safety Index, this kind of rating system for companies that they can use to show or demonstrate that they are performing or are on their way, have a commitment to do things in safety. And of course, there are companies with different sizes of their footprint, but there's one company, for example, that probably has 10% of the global safety footprint, something like 120,000 deaths or something related to their value chain. So but it could of course be fewer. Most of them are fewer, of course. But in any case, but this is a way not only to talk about their employees like you do in occupational health and safety, but also those that you are related in crashes where company vehicles are involved or suppliers are involved. One of the key things in this rating, and will be a part of, I think, the declaration that most companies needs to do, is about compliance. Compliance with road rules when they're operating the road transport system. And that is a part of this reporting system as well, and will probably be a part of many reporting systems. Because compliance with, for example, occupational health and safety rules and regulations and standards is a key issue, which means following road rules is a minimum that you need to do. Then you can do, of course, much more there. In this case, many companies have now done their reporting. They are not small companies, as you see. Amazon is not very small, and Uber is not very small either. And the furniture company started off in Sweden also is there as well. So there are a few really big ones that have started to do their reporting, and which is quite fascinating, and also to see what they're doing. But turning over to the 2025 Marrakech conference, the ministerial conference, once again, that academic expert group that made the 9 recommendations was assembled again by the Swedish, well, it was the Swedish Transport Administration, but it was the Swedish government who put forward the report. And this one goes sort of further into organizational safety, and in this case now very much about occupational road safety. And to have a look, and this is not new, of course. I'm sure many of you has been involved and knows a lot about this as well. But the question was raised: why on earth is not occupational road health and safety rules, regulations, and standard applied to the extent that it really gives a difference to road safety and behavior of corporations out there in the community? Which there's a lot of proof that it hasn't happened. So we looked more into sort of the structure of occupational health and safety and the obligations and both voluntary things but also mandatory things that companies need to address. So in relation to the first sort of the conference in 2020, which is now denoted ICTCT, which was really about sustainability development goal integration, now we go deeper into organizational safety. And it's been a really fascinating story. I'm not saying I was an expert at all in this area, but we've certainly have a lot of insights to share with the community. A little bit was in a scientific article that was published in Alexei's journal in 2023 about work-related road deaths, and this was in Sweden, and if you include what is called the third parties, those that are killed in crashes where a professional driver was involved, it's about 1/3, or in fact it was 37% of the fatals. They were related to work in one way or another, not including commuting, for example. Then it becomes even more. And this is, of course, quite sort of striking that is so many. And we made sort of the best, I shouldn't say an estimate, but it's certainly an advanced best guess of the number of people killed in fatalities related to work. And you end up with something like 100,000 employed and 300,000 third parties, those involved in crashes. Could be pedestrians hit by a truck or passengers or occupants in a vehicle colliding with a truck or a bus or something like that. So in total around 400 fatalities that are work related, if I may call it so. And this does not include commuting. Commuting would be another 150,000, but they are not sort of under the obligation of, normally at least, not under the obligation of an employer. But in any case, it means that it is a substantial number, and the most common cause of accidental death at the workplace, counting only the 100,000, is a road fatality. Across the world we're talking about now. Could of course differ for different parts of the world, but in general, this is actually facts we're talking about. But it is, as I will show now, not given the attention that it should do. And this goes back to Sweden again. If you look at, for example, how it is handled by the judicial system, by the courts, by the prosecutors and the courts and the police, in of course as those who are working for the courts or for the prosecutors. In Sweden for many years, no fatal crashes related to work has been investigated and brought to the prosecutor as something work-related. It's not a proof of something that is wrong, it's just a sign of maybe that the interest is very low. And when I'm saying this is that they are not even investigated. If they would be brought to court and so on, that's a little bit of another story, of course. And this is in contrast to that. There is no, and we found actually no differentiation between inside the gates and outside the gates of a corporation or a facility. The law in terms of prevention of the employer's obligation to prevent from ill health and in this case fatal crashes and things like that is exactly the same inside and outside the gates. There's no sign of in legislation, in conventions and things like that, or any basis for making that in that differentiation. It is in practice this is done, but it shouldn't be. If you go back, for example, to what is called the International Labour Organization, the ILO, the conventions that they have, they're very clear about that sort of, there's no exemption of something that happens in the road transport system from, let's say, within a workplace facility or something like that. And this is, of course, very important because it means in reality that there is already a well-established structure for dealing with prevention relating to 400,000 deaths per year across the world. And this is, of course, the main message, that we don't need any new laws, regulations, or not even standards. Everything is already there. It's a matter of that it has not been applied. And I'll come back a little bit more to that, of course. Here, once again, it is sometimes questioned if what is called the third parties, those who are, as I said, killed or seriously injured in a crash related to someone else, a professional driver somewhere. Not talking now about blaming or guilt or something like that, but just involvement. But you can see in the law, but more so in, for example, ISO 45001, which is the management standard for occupational health and safety. I mean, this is the best tool you can have to make sure you're fulfilling the legal requirements worldwide for occupational health and safety. Is very clear about sort of that we are talking about those who are affected by work as well. They are definitely included and definitely not excluded. The question is if you include it in statistics and so on. That's another story. But they are a part of the obligation. If you go deeper into it, I won't do that now. But if you go deeper into this question, there's no doubt about that. That is true. Now, talking about that structure that I'm talking about, occupational workplace road safety, and once again, this is not new. Many of you would say, well, hang on, what you're saying, what is new now? But there are things that are new. For one thing is that it's only a couple of years ago since occupational health and safety was declared as one of the human rights, the fundamental rights of work. And that is a little bit of an extra that in reality means a lot, actually. But there are many who are interested in company and how a corporation deals with occupational health and safety. Once again, going to the financial sector, that both needs data to make a rating of the risk of investing into a corporation. If it is a corporation that says we don't care so much for occupational health and safety, would definitely have to pay higher interest rates, be sort of rated at a lower level than a company that seems to be very careful about occupational health and safety and can demonstrate it as well. But also authorities needs reporting and sometimes urge for reporting. And in the EU, there is a new directive that urge for this to be reported. But it's also in business to business. One company doing business with another company needs, of course, to know if that company complies with fundamental road rules and comply with what you need to do in terms of how you're using the road transport system. Procurement is a special case that is definitely very important to have in mind. Public procurement is between 10 and maybe up to 20% of the global economy. And at least in Europe, it is actually it's mandatory to make sure that occupational health and safety is cared for under public procurement. There's no way that you can negotiate to have a lower protection level, let's say for road transport or something like that. There's no possibility you can do that. So it is actually the provider that needs to make sure you are complying with occupational health and safety regulation, but it's also those who are doing the public procurement to make sure that they're actually doing that. This is not happening automatically, definitely not in Sweden, and definitely not in other countries as well. Pretty sad that many have overlooked this enormous potential in making sure that road safety is cared for by such large part of the transports on the roads. As a result of our sort of work in the expert group, we came with 6 recommendations for sort of based on this kind of discussion or arguments that have been put forward to you. They are directed to different parts of the community, and the first one is, of course, directed to governments, that they should make sure, and the authorities should make sure that the law is followed, that systematic management of occupational risks must be cared for. It's an obligation to do that, and that you need to comply with safety best practices and so on. It's interesting, the difference between, for example, road rules like obeying speed limits and occupational health and safety law, which says you should do anything that is good for safety, of course within economic and other constraints. But in occupational health and safety, you need to talk about safe speeds, while road rule says you should not exceed speed limits. And there are a lot of other examples like that. I mean, you can use a car or a vehicle that only fulfills minimum safety standards. But if we understand it correctly, if you replace a car as an employer, you need to pick best possible car within the group of vehicles that would be sort of make sense to use in your organization. So the occupational health and safety law is stronger, long-term stronger than the road rules that we have in the community. Now, the problem is, of course, that the industry and other out there don't even follow sort of the road rules, which makes and I'll come back to the potential for improvement really very powerful. We also say that governments should be looking at sort of I mean, if I put it in this way, employers have outsourced completely the risk for a driver driving or for duty, both in terms of being prosecuted for things like causing someone's death or injury, breaking road rules, paying the fines. Everything is outsourced. If an employee is speeding, for example, the speed ticket goes directly to the driver of that vehicle. Fine. The question is, who really set the sort of, the scene for the driver out there? Shouldn't some kind of division in responsibilities? Probably not for road rules, but if this is on a systematic level, of course, there should be something related to the employer as well in relation to then some kind of penalties or whatever we might call it. Probably it's already there, that possibility, but we didn't find any examples of that being used. The next recommendations goes to things related actually to public procurement very much, like cities, because they not only have a lot of procurement or public procurement for different kinds of services and so on, but they also have other possibilities to strengthen the professional use of the road transport system. They have sometimes the license to operate, possibilities with taxi services and bus services and so on, things like that. The power of a city is just enormous in most parts of the world, we should say. It's not only the western part, sort of, even more probably in other parts of the world. A city has enormous possibilities to actually do things, to make sure that corporations or organizations comply and take responsibility. The third recommendation goes to the financial sector, and as I said, they have a really big role. Some people believe that sustainability reporting is just greenwashing or whitewashing or yellowwashing or whatever it might be. A company just declaring a lot of positive things and so on. This is not true. This is actually not true at all. The number of analysts working in the sector, the financial sector, looking deeply into the performance of organizations is huge. There are more than in the universities, I should say, which makes it so interesting and important. But road safety has never delivered anything into sort of this kind of judgment of the financial stability and things like that of corporations. Now there is an enormous possibility, because occupational health and safety is a major part of how you judge a company. And there must be ways to declare how you deal with the biggest risk, because that's what I just said. It's a major fatality risk we're talking about, and that should of course be judged and make sure there is a differentiation in how you judge a corporation depending on how they deal with the road transport system. The next is about how companies and also public organizations can improve by using standards like 45,000 and 39,000, which is the management standard for road safety. The interesting thing is that if you look worldwide, the number of certified users of ISO 39001 is around 2,500. The certified user of 45,001 is 500,000. So the impact of using 45,000 as a management standard is of course enormous. And the thing is, ISO 45,000 works wonderfully well to improve road safety. You actually don't need the 39,000. The 39,000 could see as an extra where you understand a little bit more on what you should be monitoring and working with. But 45,000 has the same sort of way of, actually they are exactly the same in most parts of it, and the things you need to set in place to make sure you control your risks. But more or less no one is using 45,000 in that way. But of course you can do that. And once again, there is already a standard. There is already a wonderful standard actually that you can use. And that is what we recommend organizations to do. The next one is also about sort of organization and the next step in sort of going beyond standards and things like that is, of course, to adopt a real safety culture, a culture of safety first. And this is sort of more long term, of course, looking at what we should expect, especially from large organizations. That I think it's really a positive thing for everything if you do that. The sixth one is quite interesting. Why did we pick one recommendation in particular to the automotive sector? Well, the answer is simply that they deliver most of the technical gear to the road transport system. they are also enormous employers and have enormous supply chains as a result. But they can help their customers to control their risk that goes beyond the technology, that is related to making sure that a vehicle cannot be used outside legal obligations, speed limits, things related to alcohol, and can help a company really that wants to go beyond that. If a corporation, which if you ask them what kind of alcohol policy would like to have, they don't say, we shouldn't be more drunk than the legal requirement. In reality, they would answer, we want a zero policy. And here comes the question and the argument then for the car industry that they should care for that. They should make sure that they can deliver vehicles across the world that helps the customers to make sure they comply with occupational health and safety, with road rules and other things as well. That's why we have a special one. This was picked up by in the Marrakech conference. It was picked up in the declaration that came out from the conference. I'm not going through that, of course, but it's interesting to have a look at it. If you have a possibility, have a look at the Marrakech declaration. But it picks up very many of the recommendations that the expert group gave. Now, just to sort of now by the end of the presentation, just to say, if someone says, well, we've known this for many, many years, but what is really the potential? Now, we say 400,000 deaths. I shouldn't say easily, but without going very much beyond what it seems to be the most natural things to do, you can halve that number. Reduce average speed is probably the one that would give you most benefits, but other things would give you a lot of benefits as well. So there's no doubt. And if you look at what's happened with oil and gas industry, which has been very good in safety management and safety improvement, they've come down something like 80% in the risk of deaths for oil and gas transports for the members of that organization. It's like Shell and Exxon and Total Energy and BP and so on, those kinds of companies. They have dealt with road safety in a very professional way, and the results are just astonishing. And the results comes more from low and middle income countries than from anything else. So just to say something, why on earth has not this happened before? Well, probably it's a lot of sort of, this is the way we practice things, but it is an illusion. There's no fundamental thing that says that we shouldn't apply these kinds of structures to road safety. It has got to do, of course, with the way we are dealing with road safety, going from repression to the individual to prevention by organizations. But that there are so many tools that we have. One now, as I said, was occupational health and safety. There are, of course, other ones out there, but very many are related to occupational health and safety. Summarizing, just 400 deaths per year. The law should be applied everywhere. And it is actually, all countries more or less have this kind of laws and regulations. The gate, as we said, does not exist between inside and outside when we talk about prevention of ill health and so on. Prevention is very effective. And this is a real game changer, not new, but untapped in terms of the potential it can offer us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claes. Very interesting indeed. So now we do have some time for questions. I would suggest the following procedures. Just write down your name into the chat, and it's just a regular Zoom meeting, so you would be able to actually unmute yourself and say question yourself. But just to keep some order, I would want you to use chat to kind of register. That would be our cue. While we are waiting, Claes, so to spin off further on your question, why it doesn't happen. So like what should be more concrete step? What should be the next step to change that mindset?
There's a Swedish expression, a staircase is clean from the top and down, and you don't start in the bottom of the staircase to clean it. I think the same goes here. It is really the big players out there that needs to reinforce that the structure for occupational health and safety is applicable in the same way to road traffic as for any other activity. So that goes for the large sort of trade organizations, for the business organizations. I don't think they will have a problem with that in fact, but also for the labor unions that needs to sort of really reinforce that as well. But then it's a matter for the really big companies. The small ones cannot do so much because they are sort of locked in. So it's the big ones. But the most important one, if I may call it so, I think is the financial sector. We know one major insurance company in Sweden, Folksam, has just started to where they have big assets. And I'm not talking about them as an insurer. I'm talking about as a massive investor because they hold so much money. They are just about now to start asking every company where they have big assets, big share, their safety footprint, if they are complying with the rules and regulations related, and a couple of other questions as well, just to start off, not to punish them, but to open up the question, to declare their safety footprint in their entire supply chain and things like that. And that will be an eye-opener for the really big companies out there. But I must say that I'm not been doing audits with companies like Amazon and Uber, and we can have views on them. I'm not judging them in any way, but they are, if I may call it so, they are bloody professional when you talk about safety management. If that and what they sort of have said that they will be doing, if that is true across the whole chain, no one knows, not even them. But their attempt to address their safety footprint is very, very impressive, I must say. But it starts there. But then you need, of course, to have the police and the judicial system. Not to punish companies, that's probably not the right thing to do, but to send a message. I mean, the police is constantly targeting the individual road user. Why on earth are they doing that when they have all the possibilities to address the corporate users instead and go to 5 CEOs instead of 50,000 taxi drivers or something like that? So there's a lot of sort of barriers that needs to be addressed in this sense. Okay, that was a very long answer, Alexei. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I see we have a question in the chat. Jesus, please can you just unmute yourself and say what you wanted? Jesus Monclus, can you speak?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry for the noise because I'm in the shuttle now. I had actually two questions. One, first of all, thank you for the webinar. Thank you also for the presentation, Claes and Maria. It's always a pleasure listening to you and learning from you. First question was whether the automotive sector has reacted in some way to the recommendations, in particular to the one about providing vehicles to the independent crash assessment programs, as we are members of Latin America, for instance. The second comment that I wrote in the chat was a comment. I don't remember the name of the organization. It was an organization based in Europe. They bought shares of main companies so they could participate in their annual shareholders meetings voice a question at that time specifically on gender policies. And so I think that everybody was paying a lot of attention to those questions. It was a very way of putting some pressure on those companies. So maybe that could be an example also for the road safety performance of organizations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is it okay to answer, Alexei? Yeah. Thank you, Jesus. Those really great questions. If we take the one with the reaction from automotive industry, they've started now with NCAP of trucks and other commercial vehicles and so on, and that's Euro NCAP, but I think it sort of will go to what is called the Global NCAP, where Latin NCAP is a part of it. And by the way, the leader of the Latin NCAP was one of the members of the academic expert group, Alejandro Fujas. But it's important that automotive sector understand once again that it is not only about the sort of safety performance in itself of the vehicles, which is a natural part, of course. It's also helping their customers with making sure they're used in a way that is in congruence with the decisions taken by the top management of that company. That's going to be so important, and especially because there are integrity questions related to if you start controlling drivers, if you start to record what they are doing. I mean, those things should be addressed by the automotive sector that really can deal with those kinds of questions in a very effective way. So they are so important. But they're not so used to this, but we know that they can be very flexible if you are I'm not saying putting pressure, but if you give some good examples of what can be done. The other question, Jesus, is about sort of, starting to ask those kinds of questions, which is a good way. And I really like the activist idea, which is great. But I would be even more happy if your organization, as an example, Mafre, which is probably one really has a lot of shares in big companies across the world, would ask the question. I think there's more power in your organization than in a couple of activists coming in. But we need both, Jesus. We need both. We need both the activists, but we really need the big investors out there. And you probably represent one of the bigger ones, I guess, with the assets that a big organization like an insurance company holds. But anyway, great. Good to see you. Drive carefully.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I see Lars Ekman next in line. Lars?
Yeah, thank you ever so much. It was so nice to hear from Marrakech and so. But I should just state that you have destroyed one of my best stories because I always thought it was so strange that you could. IKEA took responsibility for the carpet not to be produced by child labor, but when the carpet was delivered, they took no responsibility at all, even though the lorry was labeled with IKEA. So my question is actually, how come that nor you nor me earlier found out to include occupational safety in our work?
Yeah, that's one of the best questions, Lars, that I've put to myself. I think so. Sometimes I'm ashamed, and sometimes I'm embarrassed, and sometimes I'm very upset with that. But I remembered myself actually being, I was director of road safety in Sweden. I went to the legal guys working with public procurement, and said, it wouldn't be a good idea to include road safety. And I was sent back to my room with them saying, can't you just stop daydreaming about everything that we should put into the procurement requirements and do something else instead without sort of, disturbing us? And they were wrong. We know that today. They were actually, if I may call it, bloody wrong. But I'm not sure anger helps us here, and so on. I have no good explanation, Lars. The Swedish authority on occupational health and safety, they are well-meaning. They've expressed themselves in clear ways over the years. There's no doubt about that. But they had no support from the judicial system, and they had no support from the labor organizations, and they had definitely no help or support from the sort of employers organizations like in Sweden, Svenskt Näringsliv and so on. I think that will change now. I think it will, but as I said, I blame myself. I don't blame others. But it's a very good question, Lars. And IKEA is actually doing something substantial now, and in good faith and in good spirit, and with the IKEA way, which means it takes time because they want to have partners that understand what they mean and so on. But we can see progress happening, definitely.
Yeah, so I have changed my story now. So to say that it's a kind of success, and I'm ashamed as well. So
Thank you, and we share that. Good to see you.
Yeah, a little bit provocative question. So now, when kind of European countries, American countries, well, we're still kind of rich countries, but there are other regions in the world, other type of companies raising to power, accumulating quite much money, and there is a quite intense competition going on, and like companies like Tesla, for example, they have been driven in autonomous modes millions of kilometers, collected lots of data, experience, everything, and kind of neglecting safety. European companies play in more fair. We have never tried anything like in live traffic. That puts us behind. The same competition with Chinese companies. Well, if you save on safety, you can sell stuff with a lower price, for example. So isn't it so that by putting more and more pressure on the companies, like more and more responsibilities, you have to think about carbon footprint, gender policies, now safety, add more to that list. Eventually, we kind of start to lose the competition game.
It's a wonderful question, I'd say, but we need to break it down a little bit and first ask ourselves, this kind of thinking, does it benefit the sort of rich part of the world or the low middle income part of the world? And the answer is that when normally we take safety initiatives, it is picked up by the rich countries first, and then eventually, but with weak institutions, people lacking knowledge and so on, it doesn't really help more than a few countries out there. This kind of approach has a potential to be much more effective in the low and middle income countries than in the rich countries. I mean, something like, is it 80% of the production of things and so on takes place in the low and middle income countries? That's where you have most of the logistics on the road that happens in those kinds of countries. That's where you can make an impact really on the number of deaths and serious injuries, in particular to pedestrians and those who are sort of hit by these kind of transports. So the potential is probably bigger than most of the times where we invent or come up with good ideas or doing things, simply because you can reach all the way out. And that is what has happened with like oil and gas producers, seeing that they can perform a transport almost as safe in a low-income country as in a high-income country. But the other question is, of course, is there a cost? Yes, there's always a cost. Here we're talking about a management cost, probably. We're talking about that you need to invest into knowledge and management if you want to have a better safety. But the question is there a sort of an upside on that? And the answer is, there's so much evidence that a corporation that cares for safety and also road safety is a more profitable company in the long run than a company that doesn't care for things. And if you add to that, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, I don't know, but there's a lot of evidence at least showing that. But the more important thing is that a company that doesn't care, that must report on the safety footprint and says, we have a high safety footprint, we killed 200 children last year, we don't care, is within 2 to 3 years in deep trouble. I can promise you. They have to pay higher interest rates. There are fewer investors that want to spend their money doing the investments, especially the big funds from insurance companies, retirement funds. They want safe investments. A CEO that says, I don't care for carbon footprint, or I don't care for equity, or I don't care for safety. Now, even if the president of the US has another view, which I might suspect, that won't survive when we're talking about the big business, talking about investments. They will definitely care. But of course, you need to report on it. You need to have examples of that you can actually do things, and there needs to be a very serious. And that's when I said about analysis in the financial sector. They're much more serious than what you, well, expect them to be, actually. But we need to work on all those kinds of things. But yes, Alexa, it's really a wonderful question, because it puts focus on so many things. And the other thing is, even you and I, being academics, you for a shorter time, me for too much time, need to go outside our comfort zone and start looking at things like financial sector, investments done, how things work in organizations. I think that is almost an obligation for us. I'm so happy that your journal is opening up for more of this broader perspective, because we need them. The expert group, for the first time, we brought in one person from the financial sector, a green investor expert. We also brought in a person that was an expert in occupational health and safety law, which opened our eyes to such an extent that was just fantastic.
Okay, great. I see another question. We have just a few minutes left, so that would be the last one. Richard Fredriksson, please speak up.
Okay, since there was no one else asking, I have a question on one of the older topics, the recommendation from the Stockholm conference on 30 kilometers per hour. This is something that we talked about in Sweden since as long as I worked in this field, from the 90s, and Sweden still seems to be worst in class on this issue. What are we doing wrong, and what can we learn from the other countries that actually start to pick up on this?
Yeah, good question. And hello, Richard. Good to hear from you. I think one of the big problems is the misinterpretation of the law from that authority in Sweden that really has this thing in their hands. That is what is called Transportstyrelsen in Sweden. They've actually misunderstood it, and then you say, how on earth can you say that they misunderstood it? And then I say, I wrote that law together with people from the government. So I know what we meant by it, but it has been so misinterpreted, saying that if you want 30 in a local government area, there needs to be something different with that area. That's nothing in the law that says that. But and that has really been the hurdle for Sweden. So it is a mishap in our bureaucracy rather than will, because there's so many cities that would go to 30 if that was easy for them to do that, no doubt. We choose the voluntary way, but it was blocked by sorry for there's probably someone from Transportstyrelsen listening and so on, so apologize for being so aggressive. But that's the risk of inviting an old fart like me. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks.
So once again, thank you for joining us today and for sharing these new insights. I would also remind you that both recommendations from 2020 and 2025 are available online, and we will put them on the webinar webpage so that you can download and read them. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and see you next time at the new ICTCT webinars. There are some in the pipeline. Bye-bye.